when you work at something day after day, week, year after year, and you build up a recognized name and brand that other people say positive things about you, I think that's probably the most important thing you can do. It's also personally rewarding, but at the end of the day, when an investment community is going to look at who they want to purchase, very high on that list is what's the reputation of that person or that business in that particular market.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Flywheel Effect, where we're sponsored by Vital, the source for integrators and home service businesses to improve their businesses through data analysis and upping their game so that they can work on their business instead of in their business. I'm here with my host, Matt Bernath. Matt, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, Brent. Best I've actually felt all week. I was under the weather for a few days, just super tired. Now I'm feeling amazing and looking forward to a wonderful weekend.
Was it just like time, like you needed a good night's rest, or was it something else?
I don't know. It was like it felt I had like a headache and brain fog and just tired. So maybe I was run down. Maybe I was coming down with something. There was a little chest congestion, but I'm good now. So it wasn't like a full-fledged illness.
It's getting that time, a little bit of sickness. I know that I'm going to get sick within the next month, and I'm going to get a cough, and it's going to drive me crazy for 3 months. And I'm just dreading that moment, but I know it's going to happen. But yeah, what can you do? So today we have an interesting episode. This is a follow-on to a session I led at CEDIA this past year, CEDIA Expo for the trade show for home integrators, called The Perfect Exit. And we had such a great conversation with our three guests. And first time we ever had three guests, in addition to Matt and I, that have sold their businesses and talking about what that process is like and what they're doing now. Now, the three people we have are three great integrators who've done it for a long time. Gordon van Zuiden, he was the CEO and founder of Cyber Manor up in the Bay Area. And I guess founded in 99, and last year, after a 25-year run, sold it to Daisy, one of the new companies that are really going out there and making a move in the industry. We also have Eric Crawford, Loop Technologies, founded it in 2005 and sold it 2023. Again, over 20 years. Oh, actually, no, not quite 20 years. 18 years of running that business. And the third person we have is Ed Gilmore, who's of Gilmore Sound Advice, founded in 91 and then merged with AHT Global in 2025. So we have kind of three unique scenarios of an exit. Ed, Eric, and Gordon, how are you guys doing today?
Doing well. Doing well.
We're doing great.
So far, so great. So, Ed, you were a little late today for showing this. Was it an integrator issue or was it something else?
No, it was coming back from a meeting and then running into a client that took me completely by surprise. That showed up in the showroom for, we have what's called an open showroom, and we share with Planar. So she was here for her business, IMAX, to look at some new screens, and I had no idea she was going to be there today. So it took me by surprise and completely took me off my game, because thank God you guys texted me. But I was.
We know how to find you.
Yeah. So as a merger, you're still working in the business for a period of time after your sale. Earlier this year, right?
Yes, it was late January this year.
So on our session at CEDIA, we kind of dove into a lot of stuff, but I think we left a lot of things on the table. And I want to use this episode to really go deeper as to what your mindset was around sale or exit and when you came to that realization. So, we can just kind of go around the table. I think this is something we covered a little bit, but let's make it a little deeper. Like, why was getting out something that was important to all of you? And hey, Gordon, why don't you go first? Because I think you're an interesting case with Daisy.
Well, I'll answer that question in just a moment. I just want to preface by saying, I've enjoyed being on a lot of panels and then a lot of talks over those years for Expo and a number of other organizations. And I think I mentioned to you, Brett, I can't think of a panel that was more important and more moving than this particular topic. I often say that I remember 4 days in my life. I remember, the day I got married. I remember the 2 days each of my children were born. And I remember the day that we closed on the sale to Daisy. I mean, these are life-changing moments, and ones that when you think about how important they are to your life, you realize then how critical it is to truly understand that what you need to do. The question of marriage, the question of kids, and the question of selling, I think, are all pretty much top of life moments. So, and this latter one about selling was one I really thought about. Age forced me to think about it, I guess, more than anything else. Age and concerns over liability. I spend most of my life, you're just in an asset acquisition mode. You're buying a house, paying for the kids to go through school, travel, all these other things, and life is good. And then suddenly you kind of built up this nest egg, but at the same time, you have technicians running around in vans that could get hurt. You have other liability issues. You have AR issues. All these liability things start to crop up that start to exceed the reward of what you're getting out of the business. And suddenly you have this kind of aha moment. Mine was probably, it just turned 70. Mine was close to 65. But I said, there's got to be a transition here. There's got to be something that keeps this around, because otherwise there's a real risk. I've got employees that need to have that. I want to keep them on. I have clients that I want to continue to maintain. I have vendor relationships, and there needs to be some transition. And it wasn't clear to me what that transition would be. We can talk about that a little more later. But to answer your question specifically, for me, it was, around 65, the quote unquote retirement age, but it should have been much, much sooner.
Yeah, I'm curious about that, Gordon. Thanks for sharing. Prior to 65, had it crossed your mind at all, like what an exit looks like or what the future looks like for your business? And if so, what stopped you from doing anything about it in the past?
Well, I did. So actually, it's kind of funny how life's events kind of force them to make certain decisions. So at the age of 59, my wife had just stopped working. Our dog was like a month from passing away. Our kids were off to college. And we had this kind of moment where, everything was kind of in order for us to do something different. And we'd always wanted to live in Paris because my wife's brother has lived in Paris for the last 25, 30 years. So we can call it our senior year abroad. So my wife said, late in 2014, I think it was, that I'm going to go to Paris for a year. So if you're on the plane on January, whatever it was, with me, you can join me, but I'm ready for my senior year sabbatical. So I have to figure out how is Sandy Mariano going to run if I'm going to be in Paris. So I actually had that year of 2014 that I found somebody who I thought was really excellent to run the business for when I was gone, and hopefully one that could continue to run it for a long period of time. So that was the beginning when I turned 60 of thinking, okay, let's see, we want to do this senior year abroad. We did it. It was wonderful, great, all that good stuff. And I had somebody in place to hopefully steer the company for the foreseeable future.
So you went. You went to Paris for the year.
Went to Paris for a whole year. Yeah.
How crazy were you for that first month?
Dude, how much time do we still have on this podcast? There were a lot of very long phone calls with the one running the business. And there were several times I remember being in our Paris apartment that I would turn to my wife and say, I don't know if this is going to work. I may have to fly back. And I spent 8 months preparing for this transition with the people, with him and everything. But it's one thing to do all the preparation. It's another thing just to be gone. So it was a very bumpy road, I guess think of turbulence in an airplane, but not enough to crash. It felt very uncomfortable. Anyway, we got through it. And so,
This lesson is so critical. Like what you just did is you have a business that you've run that you've been dealing with every day for 20 years. And you were able to set yourself up to not be there every day for a year. And not just not be there every day. It was like you're playing golf down the street. You were 9 hours away, 9 time zones away from from your business. And I guess there's nonstop flights from Paris to San Francisco, but they're like 10 hours. Dude, it's like the lesson for integrators is so incredible is that you can actually do this. Like you don't have to be on everything.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the lesson is you're not as important as you think you are, really. I mean, if you have capable people, they can step up. Doesn't mean it's not going to be bumpy, but capable people do step up. And we see it all the time. I'm
awesome.
going to watch the Laver Cup tennis tonight, and Team Europe is highly favored over Team World. But they're all great tennis players, and we might see a surprise. and take over the cup. Anyway, so that was kind of a lesson learned. The other lesson was after he ran it for 2 years, he said, I'm leaving, I'm going to Delmont's. So I had another oh shit moment at that point. But I'll let other people kind of tell their stories and take it from there.
Eric or Ed, either whoever would like to start. But I think Eric, one area that you kind of lean on what Gordon was getting to in the beginning is the importance of what we spoke about on the panel and what it means to you. Because I think you have a lot of passion around this preparation for sale and what it means to integrators to know when they're ready.
Yeah. And I think, my story is a little bit different than Gordon and Ed in that, my sale was a complete exit. That was what I wanted. I did not want to continue to be involved, potentially offering myself on a very, limited, percentage if needed. But the sale, was more so that it was time for me to move on. I needed to be somewhere else. And so that was, set in motion 6-ish months before when I was looking for a broker saying, hey, I'm not looking for someone who is looking to merge with us and me to stay on board and run the location. So as you're having these conversations with potential buyers, recognize that this is an exit. This is not a acquisition merger type journey. And so, for me, that side of it, some of the conversations I had with potentials was a no, because they were looking for me to stay on to continue to run the location or continue to grow and coach the buyer. And so I think, as I shared on the panel, for me, I'm a fairly stir crazy individual. My upbringing kind of made this lifestyle. When things get calm and the seas are flat and there's no turbulence, that's when I start freaking out, and that's when I need to do something. So, as I shared on the panel, it was, I got to the point with the loop where I wasn't sure there was anything else I could bring. Yeah, I felt that, my skill set had been, for lack of a better way, fully leveraged, and that it was time for someone else to take the company and build it. And it was time for me to move on to something different. So that was the big part for me, and the big part of the exit. Like I said, a little bit different than Gordon and Ed. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Eric. The piece that I heard or picked up from that I wanted to highlight is you were very clear on what works for you and what doesn't work for you. And I think in generalities, what we've seen from many integrator sales, not all, many, is that they're treated like an escape hatch, that nobody plans for them. It's either, an illness that forces sale, or somebody just gets to their breaking point and decides to exit. A lot of the, those exits that we've seen over the years are more of an escape hatch than something that was planned. And it sounds like you planned for it and you created your boundaries and what you do and don't want. How could you turn that into some advice for somebody who's listening today who thinks about maybe down the road exiting? What are some things they should consider as options to set boundaries around? Yeah, I guess I think, exiting is something that every integrator should be thinking about, I would say, every day. I've had some, pretty traumatic medical things with my immediate family over the past couple of years, and then none of them were expected. And if you're thinking that, you need to be at work every single day, and you need to be there when the crew starts, you need to be there when they leave, you really need to have some reflection, because life throws things at you that you may not be ready for. And those things, they don't come and knock on your door and say, hey, be ready for this in 6 months, because it's going to completely shift your entire world. No, you wake up one morning and a family member comes back from a doctor's appointment and everything shifts. All your priorities shift. Everything realigns. And so I think that every owner should be constantly evaluating, where they're going, what they're going after, what they're trying to do. And, for me, it's a side of that. And I mentioned this, at the event too, that, really thinking about your why, really thinking about what you're going after. What are you looking for in your business, whether you're exiting or not?
I loved my business. I loved working at it every day. My team was the one that was saying, Eric, we would like you to step away a little bit. Like, we have this, we're okay. And I'm like, but I want to be here. Like, I love this. I love what I do. I love meeting with clients, and I love building the team and doing all these things. And they're like, well, yeah, but, we would like you here just a little bit less. And so, being able to really figure out what are you looking for, in your day to day. So often we push owners' needs to the side to focus on our customers, to focus on our team, to focus on all of these other things, and rarely on ourselves, rarely on what we want. I believe that, the word I try and live by every day is intentional, and being intentional with every single second that I have. And so, your question, Matt, about, wrapping this around integrators is, be intentional with yourself as an owner. I mean, heck, you own a company. You're steering an organization. You're putting, you're responsible for the food that people are, buying via the paychecks that you're able to provide them. So be intentional with your company about what you're going after. Do you want it to be a $600,000 a year husband-wife business? Or do you want it to be a $6 million company that you can, go to Paris for a year? What are you looking for with your company? And once you do that, in my opinion, then all kinds of things clear up. All kinds of things now suddenly, rise up, and now you could suddenly have clarity of what you should be working on every day. If that answers your question.
I love that. And it reminds me of a conversation I had with a mentor this year as I started to kind of really unpack the reality that most of us, or maybe I'm not speaking for most of us, but a lot of people that I encounter are living in a box that they didn't create. They're living in a box that was created by, circumstance or upbringing or education or, many other different things. And, what he shared with me was kind of a phrase that relates to what you just described. And he said, Matt, whenever there's a decision to make or whenever there's a challenge that you're faced with, answer this question, if I had it my way, and fill in the blank, which is really interesting because I think initially, especially in our industry, we have a lot of really super great people that want to do lots of things for others. Many times we don't think of ourselves first, and so using that phrase of if I had it my way in the design of your business, if I had it my way, I'd be able to go to Paris for a year every 5 years. That's a real thing. That's something you can plan for. And I think there's this, I don't know about for you guys, but there has been this concept I've observed where people don't actually believe they can design the life they want or design the business they want, but they can, right? And all you have to do is just use that phrase of hey, if I had it my way, I would want this to happen. So it sounds like, Eric, you were very intentional about if you had it your way, this is what it would look like.
Yeah, and it was. And maybe somewhat bittersweet because at the same time, I'm a quite restless individual.
You also have some really good advisors, Eric, too. I think that was a big part of
that's
it.
True.
You weren't just thinking through this on your own.
That's true. That's very true. Yeah, I'm a firm believer in, outside input, especially people from a different industry. Because, I guess a really quick sidebar, you guys, is that I think one of the worst things that our industry does that I've heard for the longest time is that we love what we do and we use as an excuse to not make enough money, to always be at work, to have a job instead of a business. And I hear it all the time in all the classes I've taught and integrators I've met with, where they're like, well, yeah, but I love what I do. Well, yeah, but I love what I do. Well, you know what? There's a lot of people out there that make lots and lots of money and have lots and lots of freedoms and, build the life that they want, and they still love what they do. So I think getting input from people outside of this industry to help us recognize that, hey, we may love helping customers, be able to host that Super Bowl party and, everything go great. That doesn't mean we need to provide that, last minute, 8 p.m. support free of charge just because we think, oh, but we love what we do. And I think, that outside input helps us get that reality check of whoa, wait a second, we shouldn't be doing this for free, or there's a process we can put in for this, or those types of things. We get someone from outside the field.
There's one other thing I'd like to, and I always don't want to hear Ed's thoughts, but as I think about the topic, the perfect exit, what we're talking about, equally important is the perfect entry. Because you can exit, and then what are you exiting to? Now, obviously, there's different points in your life when that answers, different answers for it. But I think Eric had a very clear answer as to what he wanted to enter into. I was fortunate with Daisy. The exit from Cyberman entered into a very successful and enjoyable relationship right now with Daisy. But I think, those are two sides of the coin that have to be understood. You can just be frustrated or just need to exit. But the reality is you have to answer the question, then what?
Yeah.
And I think, Ed is probably a good example because has that complimentary exit and then what?
Yeah, Ed, I'd like to kind of dive in. One thing that I remember from our talk on the panel is you started thinking about exit probably later than you should have, right? Like in preparing for it.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're looking at somebody, an Eric who's completely intentional about what he's doing to somebody who's completely unintentional about how he's been leading his company for a long time. And my situation really was, I started thinking about this way too late. Actually, I was at an HTSA event, probably 2019, I think it was, and Paul Starkey was talking about ways to think about exiting, retiring, how to do this. And, I keep on coming back to this idea that when I joined in the industry, it was in the late 80s. Even though I didn't incorporate until 91, I was consulting, and I was consulting in something that didn't even exist really for at least 3 to 4 years prior to that. And, for me, I was doing something else completely different. I was a classical musician. Talk about people who don't value what they do because they love what they do. The music world is filled with this. But at any rate, I was doing this kind of as a vanity thing to kind of support my musical endeavors in the very, very beginning. So when it started really getting some traction there, and we started, being able to be more than a one-arm paper hanger, and I started hiring some people, and my wife eventually joined on, really was the business manager of the company. We kept it, we just worked constantly. We did the 6 days, 6.5 days. We were working 14 hours a day. Seriously, I mean, my wife's a warrior. I mean, we had our first son. She missed 2 days, came back to work. And we had our daughter a year later. She was back the next day with the daughter, in the hall. So we really, we just worked our tail off, all the time. And we built the company. And I think we had a really good sweet spot somewhere around 2015, 16, 17, where we were like 10 people doing 4 million. It was great. And until that point, I had lived by the motto of, keep it small and keep it all. And somehow in 2014, I got the harebrained idea to open up an 8,000 square feet showroom in Manhattan, which everything changes, right? Except for my thought process about this and how it was really going to work. That's a whole different discussion that we don't have to talk about here. But the fact is that our revenue stayed pretty much the same. We had a lot more overhead. We started hiring more people. COVID hit. Showroom closed for 2 years, essentially. Then you had supply chain shortages that were happening right after that. I got hit really hard with COVID. Barely made it through that first early parts of 2020. So I had to really start paying attention to my health. And that was something that started creeping up on me. So I would say that probably somewhere around 2023, 2024, I really started thinking about how am I going to do this. Now, I'm a few years younger than Gordon, and I felt like for me, I was looking for a 5-year exit strategy. And I thought that if I could build the company and I could put the right people in seats, I can get things going, that, maybe there was a chance for this to happen in a sale, for example. Last year, I began to realize that, and this is probably 2024, somewhere in the spring, the summer of 2024, where I was really making a concerted effort. I was part of a group at that time called Synergy. I don't know if you heard of this, professional development group. And so there's a lot of support there, a lot of people that are dealing with, Gordon, you remember Synergy too, that are sharing and dealing with this. And I remember going down to a forum group in Austin. And the realization had really sunk in. It was a twofold realization. One was that we didn't have the revenue to put all those seats in. Didn't have it. To replace my wife, for example, would take 3 people. She did the work with 3 people. She really was struggling. I mean, literally coming to me saying, I don't think I can do this much longer. I don't want to do this much longer. Getting that kind of, pushback on it. And so when I was actually down at the synergy meeting, I kind of told everybody, I don't know what's going to happen. And here's what I didn't want to do. I didn't want to spend the next 5 years of my life until I was 72 years old, grinding, trying to find an exit strategy, trying to build the business to get to the exit, and carrying on with everything that I was doing at the same time. It was just overwhelming. Ironically, and this is really ironic, Al Reinhardt, who's one of the principals of HT Global, was in my forum, which I didn't really know because he didn't have a huge presence in the forum. And he actually called me up pretty soon after that meeting and said to me, hey, I want to come up and have a discussion with you, and come up. And I thought he was just coming up to look at the showroom because he has an apartment a few blocks away. And actually, it was really, let's talk about your business. Let's talk about the pain points. Let's talk about what we can do together. And so that was really how this whole thing came. And it was very quick at that point. Things really escalated very, very quickly because mentally, both my wife and I were ready. Jennifer and I were super ready at this point. And, little reminders happen, that we're not invincible. I never had taken the approach that I wanted to retire. And frankly, I won't. I mean, in 5 years, I may go back to music and just doing something I really love doing and enjoy doing it, but doing it on a high level. So for me, the idea of, I'm going to play golf, or I'm going to do really what? No, do I want more time? Sure. But I always want to be involved. And I love this industry. So, I had negotiated a lease last year, right before this merger and acquisition happened. And my wife is very upset with me for doing it because we kind of made a promise to each other that that 10-year lease that we had just struggled through, that was it, and we were going to be gone. And so when that lease came to fruition, she really came to me and said, look, I know you did this for 5 years, but I'm not sure I'm going to be along for the ride for 5 years on this. So everything accelerated and happened really quickly. So completely unintentional, in terms of the thinking. So I'm the poster child for, not really looking ahead and not really thinking about what should happen and how this company should, evolve.
When I listen to these comments, all three of us had influences outside of our own self that dictated a huge change of course. Eric talks about health and his family. Ed says about issues, his wife's concerns, and mine was she's on a plane to Paris. So, these are things that
It's reality.
This reality. Exactly. It's
Right?
not just always,
It can be tomorrow. Ed, I do have a question for you. What instrument do you play?
Well, I'm a wind player, but primarily as a clarinetist.
Clarinet. So were you back when you were a classical musician? Were you in orchestra or like quartets? Where were you focused? I'm totally curious. Like classically trained musician is something that I just love to talk about.
All right, so the backstory in all this is that I was a really successful freelance musician that also played in the orchestras in New York and in Chicago and wherever. And I did a lot of session work. Now, the backstory is that my wife used to hire me. I knew her for 7 years before we actually met. She would call me up whenever there was a jingle, like the national jingle in Chicago. And it was worth my time to fly out there. It was $100 round trip from New York. You go out and you make $10,000, doing a McDonald's, one of the major car, or for example, you may remember in the late 80s, there was a United Airlines campaign where they used Rhapsody Blue, right? So that was me playing on that. And that ran for 15 years.
So we've all heard the music, Ed. That's awesome.
Yeah. So, but she would hire me. That's how we met. And then, when we finally actually met, she was saying, well, you have this business and you have this thing. And she was wise enough to say, hey, I can do my job remotely, as a music contractor. I can fly Chicago when I need to, but I can do it all remotely. She came to New York and just got sucked into what we were doing in the business and really was the business mind behind it.
Do you still play?
Yeah, I haven't really played much since COVID. I played the week before I came down with COVID in 2020. I had a really great concert. And then I'm not sure what it was, but it's something about that affected. Well, first of all, affected me negatively physically. I could barely breathe for a long time. So that there was that aspect of it. But no, I have something in the horizon that is going to make me take it out of the case again. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm the type of guy that always took lots of time off from the instrument and came back with perspective.
And that's great. We actually have one other person here who sold their integration business in Matt. And I think understanding, I mean, and Matt's story is even more different. But Matt, I think you were actually a little more intentional on deciding you were ready to sell, right?
Yes and no. My story is probably a lot like Eric's, more similar to Eric's. Restless, felt like I needed a new challenge. Things were, going well, and I felt like I had reached my, capacity, if you will, to grow the business at that time, or desire, if you will. And I had my hands in a bunch of other things. And so at the time, it was a grass is greener decision, which the more mature Matt has recognized is not the right way to make those decisions. But where I was in life at the time, it's like, yeah, I've got my hands in these other things. Let's go pour fuel on that fire. But the reality, of course, that I think we all know with maturity, we realize that the grass grows where you mow it and tend it, right? So for me, the intentionality was more around, I had built a business that could operate without me, and selling at that point was a viable option. And it only took me about a year of working with, a broker and making some other changes. And eventually, it was like a 6-month long close period because of the banks at the time. But for me, I would say the intentionality was more around knowing that I wanted to move on, and also having the process of the prior 4 years of just building the business to run without me, regardless of what I was doing. So we were incredibly profitable. I had a lot of freedom, and that's how I ended up with my hands in all these other things. In hindsight, I might have done it differently. I might have worked on my leadership skills more, such that I could balance all of these different things that I had, versus saying, hey, I need to put an effort here, put effort here, put an effort here. But ultimately, I also think through that experience, everything happens for a reason. Through that experience, I learned so much that I've been able to give back to others. And also when I went to sell my security company in 2023, in building Vital, like all of that stuff has happened successfully because of what I learned through that experience. And so I think the journey, no matter how it plays out how it's supposed to, whether you do it with intention or not. But what I would love to learn from the three of you, and maybe we'll just call you out individually, having gone through this process, being where you are, I just shared some of the things I think I would have done differently. What are some of the takeaways for you? And let's start with Gordon here. What are some things now, looking back, that are not regrets, because I'm sure you don't regret any of it? What are things that you might coach other people who are maybe 20 years younger than you? What might you coach them about in terms of planning ahead for a potential exit?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, and I'm getting also reaffirmation of this thinking process just through the year and a half I've been with Daisy. And that is pretty much true. Whatever you start, and I think you mentioned this on one of your previous podcasts, you brick by brick. There's no quick path to riches. It's every day doing the best job you can and creating a brand, your own personal brand within your business and your clients and employees, that you're really good at what you do, that other people recognize. Your competitors say in your region, oh, they're a really good company. They're good people. They'll take care of you. We'll take care of you too, but they're good people. So when you work at something day after day, week, year after year, and you build up a recognized name and brand that other people say positive things about you, I think that's probably the most important thing you can do. It's also personally rewarding. But at the end of the day, when an investment community is going to look at who they want to purchase, very high on that list is what's the reputation of that person or that business in that particular market. Obviously, there's financials and pipeline and all the rest. But now, as part of Daisy, the first thing Daisy will ask me and the other founders is, who do you recommend? Just like our customers, who do you recommend for my home, technology installation? Who are the best people that in a given part of the country that we should be talking to? And so I think that mentality of doing the best you can across all sectors, your vendors, your employees, your clients, and that's just in your DNA. And I think most of us have that in our DNA, but not to forget how important that is to the potential exit of your business. And when you start losing that energy and vitality to keep doing that, is really a point of concern, because I think Warren Buffett will say that it takes 40 years to build a brand and you could destroy it in 5 minutes. So and that's very true. So you've got, once you realize that you've kind of turned the corner and you say, I don't get up on Mondays as excited anymore about going to work, that should be a red flag, and say, okay, I better be thinking about how I can turn that into something positive. So
I think that point's really important, Gordon. And I actually have a 1 minute side note on that. Is my father, my whole family was all car dealers, and he's seen a ton of car dealers make a lot of money. They're big businesses. They could be $100 million businesses, but they're really driven typically by the dealer principal. And he decided when he woke up at 2005 and says, you know what, I'm not excited to go to work anymore, that he had to sell, because he has seen way too many of his friends hang on for too long, and the whole thing goes south. And car dealerships are incredibly leveraged businesses. You have floor plan and everything else, so it's a little different. But things go south quickly if you lose that energy to really drive it forward, and especially if you don't have the team to do it with you. So that moment is so critical for so many people that I think they ignore it to their detriment.
Yeah. Well, just like people ignore their health, they ignore their businesses. Oh, this doesn't feel right, but I'm going to live on for a while until they find something catastrophic. I want to echo what Gordon was saying about brand. I mean, I see way too many people that are really basing their brand on product or what they represent. What they sell is their brand. It's not their brand. You are the brand. If you're the company and we're running the company, you are that brand. And goodwill in this industry goes a really long way. And I think that if you really treat people well in the industry and you're not aggressively trying to capture or share in your market and being a little unscrupulous or being underhanded in any way, it goes a really long way with the business. I think, one of the things that we did was a really good brand with my company. And I'm always astonished by how many people actually know about what we've done through it. And that's rewarding to hear that. You can't pat yourself on the back too much about it, because you got to keep on producing and keep on going. But I always, to add to what Gordon was saying about when you wake up in the morning, you don't really want to go to work, I would add one more thing. If you're not interested in learning anymore, then it's going to go out, because this is a constant, huge curve of learning and learning and learning. And if you're going to stop learning about what it is that drives your business, then get out now, for sure.
Ed, I appreciate that. That's great feedback. So if you were able to time travel to Ed Gilmore 20 years ago and sit down with him and be like, hey, man, here's a few things that we've learned in the future, what would those things be that you would tell yourself, in regards to the exit planning?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not making an excuse for this. I mean, when we came in 40 years ago, our generation of guys that came in, we were more hobbyists and we weren't really business people. I think I would have latched on to having, somebody who really had a good idea of business development, what that meant, KPIs, paying attention to process, doing all that stuff. That came way too later for me, really. And I would say, base your business on process. Base it on the solid business KPIs that are available to us now. I mean, people like Vital and are really helping and coaching. That's there for you to maximize.
But that's boring, Ed. That's boring. Why do we want to do all that?
You know what? There's nothing boring about having a successful company. I mean,
Yeah.
that's super exciting, right? So instead of, going to a job site saying, "Boy, this is a fantastic project that we just finished, and the client's really super happy, and they're going to recommend this to our friends." That's great. That's awesome. That's part of doing this. But the other part of it is ensuring that financially you're sound. Financially, you can take those next steps. Financially, you can do the things that I couldn't do at the end. I mean, that's why I say I'm the poster child for this, right? So, by the way, to be clear about this, my financial situation wasn't dire. It wasn't like, oh, I have to or else. I could have chose to close the doors at any given time that I wanted to do it. But I cared about my employees. I cared about my clients. I wanted to make sure that they were taken care of. And when the opportunity came up to do this transition, it made the most sense for me that way.
Love that.
That's great.
Yeah. So with those things you just described, you would have had even more options.
Oh, for sure.
Is what you're saying. Yeah.
It may have been like the last 10 years a little bit more than I actually did. Right.
Yeah.
And I could have gone to Paris maybe for
Right.
Yeah. Been nice.
One other comment maybe I'll, I oftentimes refer to in some of the recent papers that I write about a survey that John Heyman did a year and a half ago from Control Tour of 30,000 clients across the country on how satisfied they were with their home technology systems on a scale of 1 to 10. And the response on average they got was 4. And that means they wouldn't even recommend it to another friend. And I bring this up now because I think a big part of the reason that's 4 is because so many integrators did not have a perfect exit. So many of those clients are suffering from an integrator that had an imperfect exit, didn't return calls, that just went out of business, that did something else, that handed it over improperly. And I think the turmoil of the unsuccessful exit is a big reason why we generally have unsatisfied clients. This whole
There was another part of that data, Gordon, that's super important to understand. The other thing that he found out was that there were 200,000 C4 systems that were on OS 2.
Yeah.
And so what does that tell you? What it tells you is that those integrators weren't interested in maintaining and supporting their clients and making sure that they were giving them the best experience.
Yeah.
Right? They were too busy to go back, right? And we all know that our best customers are our existing customers. It's not chasing the new customer. It's maintaining the old customer. That's where you get your biggest return.
Yeah, that's
That
a lesson that
we-
not too many know.
Well, yeah, we see it over and over and over again that an integration company that's run with healthy financial results tends to have much higher customer satisfaction results, right? And so they're tied together. Plainly, those, and there's probably exceptions to this, but those integrators who have financially viable, financially successful businesses can take better care of their customers. And it's like over and over and over again, we see that. And the point I want to make is that it's not an either or scenario. We talk a lot about the warm and fuzzy of building a brand and being there for your customers. And sometimes people see that as one option. And then the other option is running this healthy, viable, financially successful business. You can do both. It's not easy, but you can do both, right? And I think sometimes there's that misconception that it has to be a choice.
Yeah, I look at a successful project as one that's on time, on budget, meets or exceeds the expectations of the consumer, and is sufficiently profitable. And if you miss one of those 4, you didn't really have a successful project. You need all 4 to truly be successful. And that profit allows you to provide that service and do the next job at the same level, or else you're dead. Eric,
I would only add to that, Brent, that project has to be serviceable. Right?
Yep.
I mean, you can't lose your shirt because the process was so screwed up that you're constantly servicing, using money on that service. So you have to have the process set up to make sure that project is not only that it exceeds their expectations, but that there's a service standard that's set for it, so that you can then actually make money out of it.
Projects have gotten way too complex to not have an understanding of that these things have to have some service and some love. Like it's not just putting in a couple of speakers and a receiver and amplifier anymore. So Eric, now Matt's question has been, what are the lessons things that you would have done differently, or the key things that you think others should learn from your process that maybe would have made it better for you?
Yeah, I would say, being a process guy, I've been a process guy for a long time. So for me, that wasn't a gap. That's what, as I joked around, that's something I just love. So that's a passion for me. When I kind of think about the things that went well or, areas that, really needed to be tweaked, one of them, someone told me earlier on when I was thinking about, selling and next steps. And they said something I thought was really valuable. And they said, remember, a business is an investment for a buyout. So, if they have $1 million in the bank and they're looking at where to put that $1 million, ballpark number, they take that $1 million, they're going to throw it in a mutual fund that will generate $80,000 a year. So if they can take $1 million and put it into a mutual fund to generate around $80,000 a year, and they don't have to do a single thing, and you think your business is worth $1 million, but they have to come to work every day to make $90,000 a year, think about that. And I think a lot of times people don't think that way. They're like, no, my business is worth, $5 million. Okay, well, if it's worth $5 million, think about what someone could do with $5 million, and would your business still be a good investment? So that was one thing that was shared with me. It was really important. The other two things I would say is one that worked incredibly well for us was that we selected a broker who had a close connection with a bank that was, and I don't remember what the verbiage was, but it's basically an SBA approved bank. And there's all kinds of banks that write SBA loans, but there's ones that are, figuratively speaking, like a gold star SBA bank, meaning that those banks do not have to go back to the SBA to get approval to write that loan. And in my situation, what that meant was that then when the bank saw the paperwork and they saw the purchase price and saw everything, literally within 24 hours, they came back and said, yes, we'll approve this. Yes, we can prove this loan amount. Yes, you're good to go. Whereas an earlier exchange, it went on for 4 months, 5 months, as this bank was going back and forth with the SBA about, oh, well, now we need this piece of paperwork. What about this? And all these other things. Whereas the bank that ended up being, critical to the transaction, we literally got approval and heck, the whole paperwork, all the loan paperwork took, I think it was a week, literally the whole thing. So that bank is critical to the transaction. I mean, maybe you have, maybe the buyer's some angel that's, sitting on a couple $1 million, and obviously then it's not an issue, but that's something important to figure out, when you're thinking about listing is who is going to be that bank that, you have available. The other thing I would say is that timing is really important. The concept of, I'm going to wait until next year because I can build my business more and make it worth more. Or I'm going to wait 5 years because I can build my business and make it worth more. Remember that today is only today. The things that are true today are not necessarily true tomorrow. People like Ed, you discovered that very personally when COVID happened. A lot of businesses that were worth a huge sum of money pre-COVID, the start of COVID happened and those businesses dissolved. Not to say in our industry, but in other industries. So make sure and take that into account. Don't just immediately assume that in 3 years, things will be better than they are today. That's not necessarily how the real world works. Probably a couple things I'd share.
Yeah.
Yes.
I've got a little different take on that, Eric. And I think there's also there's a bunch of reasons why believing that what's meant to happen will happen can also reduce some anxiety and stress around the entire process. Because, everybody that I've seen go through a sale, it's like an incredibly stressful time, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think also just believing, whether or not you believe in spirit or whatever, it doesn't really matter. Yeah. But the reality is like everything will happen the way that it's exactly supposed to happen. We should definitely be efforting towards what we want, but ultimately, things will happen the way that they're supposed to happen. Because sometimes you can make massive change in 3 years in your business and take it from being, a maybe 1 to 2 times multiple to a 3 to 5 times multiple or better. by,
absolutely.
by making
Absolutely.
some shifts. Yeah. So
Yeah, Matt, I'm 100% agreeing with you on that. I'm more trying to say that, more so recognize that there's always external factors, and that, on both good and bad. Exactly what you're saying. Hey, in 3 years, we can take it from here to here. Awesome. It's kind of that, bird in the hand, two in the bush type of thing. You just want to be aware and be intentional about where you're trying to go. Is maybe what
I have
would
a
say.
different way of saying what I think you're trying to say, Eric. I say this actually to a lot of business owners. Business owners tend to think of their businesses as annuities that spit off cash, and they're going to continue to spit off cash for the foreseeable future without end.
Yeah.
And assuming that your business is an annuity is just wrong. We
Yeah.
see the failure rates of businesses at every size. So there is risk in owning a business going forward, regardless of what you think its certainty of its cash flow is. So if you, and that means that, like Eric, if you have the opportunity to sell now, don't just assume that you are capable and are going to grow that business going forward. Look at it realistically. Does it provide you what you need to be able to sell? Knowing that there is some risk that you can't grow in the future.
Yeah.
I think that's a every entrepreneur believes in themselves so deeply that it will never end. And that's just false.
So I think to echo that, most of our businesses are between 5 and 20 people. That in and of itself, there's great risk in these businesses. Our key tech person, they have a health issue. I can't tell you how many integrator. Your lead tech person has a health issue, or he gets an offer from a competitive company at 30% more than you're capable of providing. That's a real risk. A client that owes you $150,000 at the end of a year and a half, and they're not really happy with how things kind of ended up, and you're trying to solve the last few problems, and you're not sure how much you can collect, and you have to come up with some kind of compromise. That's a real risk. And so I often kind of envy my peers who work for, HP or other large companies, because they could leave anytime. They have 50,000 employees behind them to support whatever. They could have retirement parties. Everybody say how great they did for their 30 years, and they ride off into the sunset.
Well, Gordon, you did leave for a year to go to Paris, so I don't know if you're that different.
Yeah,
it sounds like he might have lost some of his hair during that trip, though, because of the stress that he had to deal with being thousands of miles away.
I'm sure there's some of that, but that's been an ongoing process. But in any case, so these businesses are fraught with risk. But on the other hand, they're just the most, it's the most enjoyable thing that I've ever done in my life, was to be in the home technology business in people's homes. And even as I'm, with Daisy for a 2-year commitment with them, hopefully it will still do something after the 2 years. I love the business and I love the people in it. So, I hope to provide some role. It just can't be 60 hours a week with cash flow online all the time.
Yeah.
For sure. So let me change around a little bit. This session led after our panel that we had at CEDIA. And I think all of us, the 4 of us here, had a really good experience on that panel. I also ended up having some really interesting conversations afterwards, which I think several of you did as well. I found it very interesting that a lot of the people in that audience were interested in selling, but didn't really know what to do next. That I spoke to. I think I spoke to 3 or 4 people who kind of had that mentality. Did you guys get that sense in who you spoke to?
Yeah. They want to know what are the key things they could do now to add value to the business to somebody you want to acquire them. We already talked about it. The other thing that was mentioned was our recurring services. It's obviously now being part of Daisy, that's a big part of what Daisy's trying to bring to the industry. But we know firsthand, you have a recurring service business that automatically generates income. That overcomes a lot of the risk in a given business. It's just hard for us to get there with the kind of volume that we typically do with our clients. But that's a big one. Owning your own building that's oftentimes mentioned. If you can, and you have the financial wherewithal at 50 to buy your building now, because when you want to retire 15 years from now, that becomes a significant asset. So that if you do have to leave the business, you're left with something that has some significant value. And even better, if the person who buys your company still wants to lease your building from you, it's a double win. So, so that's the other kind of diversified. don't have all your eggs in that business basket. Think about that kind of diversification. That really is something of value.
I was going to
Go
say
ahead,
to kind of maybe somewhat of a broken record, it's just that intentionality side of it. I was talking with one of my neighbors who's very successful. He has a very large commercial building that he's looking at selling because he was approached by someone to buy it. And he's like, I mean, gosh, why wouldn't I? Like, look at this number. I mean, it's going to be great. Now's a great time to sell it. And I looked at him, I said, well, okay. But now if you sell it, you're going to have all this cash and you're going to lose the revenues from all the tenants that you've been getting every month. And now what are you going to do with this big sum of cash? And he looked at me and goes, I don't know. I've never thought about that. Like, well, maybe that's actually the first thing you need to think about here is that, like, okay, if I'm going to lose this monthly supply of recurring revenue from the tenants, but I'm going to get this big multi-million-dollar chunk of cash, then what am I going to do? So if you're going to sell your integration company, whether you're going to step away in entirety, whether you want to stay on for some period of time, whatever the payout looks like, figure out what that is that you want before you even start down the road of selling or merging or whatever it is, to make sure that whatever that thing is, it aligns. Because I only know for me that, like I shared before, that it was critical to me that my sale did not involve a 2 to 4 year buyout. And I know that I lost some of the money on my sale because I was not willing to take an offer that had a 2 to 4 year commitment. That was just, I had other things. I had the opportunity cost of these other things. So for me, I was completely good with that, and it worked out very well for them. But I think it's important that, these individuals that are looking at their businesses, be intentional about where you want to be. What are you looking for? And know that before you ever sit down at the table.
I think there's one other kind of where I'm instead of like what I found in the mentality in speaking to some of those business owners after the session was it wasn't what should I do as tactically. It's how do I get my mindset around the possibility of this sale and the nervousness that they felt around that change. And like, I try to explain to them, like, look, if you're running a business that can be sold into successful, you're going to be running a successful business, and you should just kind of like realize that they're running the same. But I think there's a mentality that's scary in thinking about some sale, and they get stuck.
I wonder if the psychology behind that is this delayed gratification concept, right? Where most of what we do in integration companies gives us fairly quick feedback, right? Making customers happy gives us quick feedback. Programming, designing, selling, there's relatively quick, feedback. I mean, of course, projects go for a long time, but there's milestones along the way, right? And you're making
They're also finite.
happy. What's that?
They're also finite. Like the service revenue that no integrator really likes to go is not finite.
Right. So, and again, this is a hypothesis.
Yeah.
It may be true, may not be true, but the concept of going from doing what you love, which is making customers happy, projects, design, whatever, to this bucket of things you don't love, which is process, finance, all these other things. It's sort of like the age-old quandary of, I know I need to eat better and exercise, but that shit sounds terrible, so I'm just going to live my life, right? And so it's sort of like this bucket of, wait a minute, I have to do all these things I don't like for the next 3 to 5 years in hopes of getting this business that I want. Well, I'm just going to keep doing things the way I'm doing them. So I don't know if that psychology is playing out or not, but it certainly makes sense that it might be.
I sense there's a lot of hesitation and fear, from these people. They weren't ready to make that. They weren't listening to us because they weren't really ready to make a step to say, I'm going to do this, right? And there's a lot of stuff that goes that subconsciously, plagues you from moving forward. I mean, for me, I'm just going to tell you that the processing that I had to go through was very, very fast. It was really hard to wrap my head around this, how this was going to happen. And felt like I was giving away a lot of agency. I was giving away my brand that I'd worked for 3 years. There's a lot of things to be afraid of, you know what I mean? That you have to untether yourself from, you know, to pull that ripcord and say, okay, I'm doing this, right? I went through probably a period of about 2 weeks where my emotions were vacillating, you know, like all over the place, you know, with this. And then I finally came to a point where I thought, if this is really what is the best solution for me right now, because there is no guarantee, and this is what's best for my life, best for my employees, best for my clients, then what am I afraid of? And so what? And it wasn't as if I wasn't going to another great organization, right? And that I could actually, and I was going to continue. So I just figured that it's just a different chapter, you know, in life. It's a different chapter in whatever legacy I may leave within that. And don't be afraid about it. Just go for it, embrace it, and do it. So I get where you're coming from that. And there is a lot of that too. I mean, nobody loves doing what they hate to do, right? Or that they feel like they're being forced to do it. But I don't think anybody is forced to be successful. Either you are or you're not. And you got to make that choice.
You know, I think of actually in terms of your company vital, I think that the word that comes to mind is vitamins. You know, it's almost like I think, you know, you provide the healthy vitamins for healthy businesses. To your point, we're all having so much fun doing the things we're doing. Then it's not I want to go into some of the areas that require that we lose weight or learn financial skill or whatever it is that are just not as much fun. You got to find some place where there's an alignment. You know, you can't just go cold turkey into doing things that are not fun. You just got to find that moderation, that balance. And for myself, I think one of the places I found that moderation that I really enjoyed, that I thought was a good mantra, was the building of our showroom. You know, that let me do all the things that I love to do for myself, that added value to the business, that added value to the brand, that it actually, in the end, I think actually paid off. So, you know, we talk about the pros and cons of showrooms all the time. We don't often talk about how that is actually an investment in yourself, in that respect, an investment in your business beyond just what it can do for your clients and your golden partners. So, yeah, all those parts are personally bubble.
I think that's a great point, Gordon. There's some soft benefit or intangible benefit to refreshing anything in the business, but you know, the building of a showroom or a refreshing of a showroom has this energetic effect to it, right?
Yes, everybody.
Yeah. Sometimes you need a specific challenge to overcome, which is actually a really to get out of your grind. And I know that applies to me. I mean, I'm a little all over the place, but sometimes I just need to find something to accomplish.
I'm just going to tell you that we're in the middle of refreshing our showroom right now. And I don't have a build space anymore. I don't need it. It's the way the process is that the HT works a little very different. And so we have this whole back space that now is completely redesigned. I'm not going to say what it is, but I can tell you that I did this 12 years ago when I built out this space in the first place. And it was unbelievably time consuming. I mean, we just eat, drank, slept, talking about the showroom in every which way. And we're kind of doing it again. You know what I mean? But this time it's so much better because I don't necessarily have to bear the financial responsibility of it. And I can just, you know, say, hey, this is a really cool idea. Let's go in this direction. It's so refreshing to be able to do this and actually having fun doing it. So yeah.
Yeah, fun's good.
Wow.
So Gordon, I a little side note, Matt may be annoyed at me at this, but you mentioned vital vitamins. And I think Matt knows what I'm going to say. And he's like, oh, shaking his head.
I know where you're going with this.
He knows exactly where I'm going. So this is great. But
You got to tell the whole story. You got to delete it.
I'll give the premise. So we were talking about a giveaway. Actually, no. One of our employees at Vital, one of our key people, of our management team, I think it was Steven found there was.
Well, no, we were getting phone calls from.
Oh, we're getting phone calls. That's right. We were getting phone calls about a company. They had a erectile dysfunction pills that were branded Grow with Vital. And our website is growwithvital, right? .com. and basically,
Oh.
the boner pills, right? And so Steven was getting lots
You
of
could not make
lots
this
of
up.
phone calls
Oh.
for basically vital
Lots of them.
vitamins. Lots of them. And we're like, what is going on? And so we searched it up, and there we found it online. Big, right on the bottle, Grow with Vital. And I'm like, this has to be our next CEDIA giveaway. Like, we should get in touch with this company and give these out at the booth. I got no one to go with me on this one.
No,
It was
there were zero team members that were backed up on that
zero
one.
team members, but I thought it was a great idea. I mean, what would be better than that? We would be the talk of CEDIA with our boner pill handout. So, but anyway, so those are the vital vitamins that are out there right now, Gordon.
I'd like to see the logo that you
Yeah,
put together.
they have nothing to do with us, but if they
Nothing.
work for you, have at it, Gordon.
There you go.
Yeah.
Old file, whatever
Oh,
works.
jeez.
It was one of my laugh points for at least almost a year, like 8
Exactly.
months. So it was great.
But then, and you could say if it lasts for more than 3 months, it's actually a big thing.
I don't know about you guys, but a 3-month boner for me be a problem.
Yeah.
All right. Are we editing any of this, or is it all going on here?
No, this is all in. This is all in there. Like, I'm the host. You guys didn't say a word. This is all me. Don't worry about it.
It aligns perfectly with who everybody knows Brent to be. So
Yeah.
there's nothing strange about this conversation if you know Brent.
Okay.
So I think we've been going for like an hour. This has been really awesome. I think it was this kind of like some of your last comments, from really the four of you, is all of you have sold integration businesses, is when you're thinking about the integrators out there who are looking at the consolidation happening, where their businesses, because like I think Ed and Gordon, especially you guys, where we are for a lot of integrators that started when this industry began in the 80s and 90s is, you're getting up in age. It's a thought process that you need to have is what is that change in mindset that you think that you can recommend to people out there who are listening to prepare themselves for this exit, which really has to happen for everybody at some point.
Well, Gordon, I'd defer to you because I think you.
And Eric, you should answer. Sorry.
Okay.
Well, one that I oftentimes say is, in the beginning, you think, how hard is it to start a business? And it is hard to start a business. There's lots of elements to getting off the ground and getting it successful and profitable. But I think it's an order of magnitude harder to exit a business. And I had no idea how challenging that process would be, because when you enter a business, you really have very little. You don't have much liability, not much inventory, not very employees. The risk is just in trying to grow the business and trying to grow a client base. But 10, 15, 20, 30 years later, you have a tremendous amount of risk and assets spread out that you didn't realize when you started, that's somehow going to have to move to somebody else in some form or fashion. So, I think that gets back to the comment that almost like when you begin the business or at any point in time, today, those people who are listening to this podcast, start today thinking about what you will need to do to exit the business and why you want to exit and what you'll do after that exit, no matter what age you're at. Because everybody exits, and the worst stories are the ones where, I actually had a former business partner who had basically a death sentence of cancer when he was 53, and he was still answering client phone calls from his bed, days before he passed away.
Jeez.
So I just, I saw it firsthand, and I just, it moves me to the point where I don't want to see that happen to anybody in the industry, and nor does anybody want that to happen. And unfortunately, it happens too quickly because we just fall in love with what we do, and then something makes it go sour quickly, and so that's the give back, and hopefully people will take that seriously and realize it's very real. It's something you got to think about right now.
I would be an optimist about this. I think that the tools are there, for younger business owners who are coming in here. Look, I've always said from the very beginning, this is a younger man's, woman's business, right? It really is. Just because the demands, just because mental toll that it takes on you. And then the whole learning component and the whole, do you want to continue doing this, right? Stress bubble that we're in. But, I think that I look around and I look at the people that are entering their 40s or mid 40s. They've got decent businesses going right now, and they have all those tools to actually move that business in the right direction so that they can have a successful, ending, for that. And yes, knowing what you want to do after you retire is super important. I mean, there's a reason why the mortality rate gets really high for people who retire because they're not thinking about what it is they want to do after they leave. So I think that's something you can think about a lot while you're in the middle of your misery of, dealing with demanding clients and HR problems and all the other, liability issues that you have on your shoulders. I mean, I can tell you right now that, for me, I have a different layer of stress that's on me right now, but it's got nothing to do with financial liabilities. It has nothing to do with HR issues or operations issues or anything. I've been relieved of all of that. And so I'm really free to actually do what I think I can do best for any company and for myself. That's, for me, what I was looking for and how I wanted to spend the last 5 years in this industry. I think everybody should think about that. How do you want to spend those last years? What is it you want to do? I want to get back. I'm on the CDA board. I'm going to be doing more of that sort of things. I love this industry. I want to give back to it. And I could not do it under the conditions that I was at.
Right. Eric?
Gosh, and I know I sound like a broken record after an hour and a half here, but it's that side of that, I would just love to see more intentionality with owners, more intentionality of putting on their own mask, before everyone else's. If you want to have, like I said earlier, if you want to have a 2-person company, you want to run it until you don't want to do this anymore and then dissolve it, that's okay. That's not a bad thing if that's what you want. But you have to take a little bit of time in a mirror and figure out what type of company you want to have. What kind of life do you want to have? I can say, in my own twisted world, Gordon, I will honestly say, taking a year in Europe sounds miserable. I wouldn't do it if someone paid me because I love working. I love being in the trenches, and my wife would probably kick me out of Europe after like 3 weeks and be like, get out of here, Eric. I'm trying to relax. So I think that as all of us and owners especially, our employees are intentional. They find a new job they like. They quit a job they don't like. They, for the most part, do what they want at their at their job, unless, someone tells them otherwise. I would love to see more owners, those that take the time to listen to this podcast, just reflect on themselves and go, where do I want to be? What kind of life do I want? Do I want to work 20 hours a week? Do I want to work 60? Do I want to sell it? Do I want to pass it to my kids for free? And once you have that internally of where you want to go, kind of what you were talking about earlier, Matt, it's amazing how things will start aligning for it. And whether you believe in God, whether you believe in a higher power, whatever it is, but when you start thinking about, here's the type of life I want to be living, it's incredible how things just start falling into place on that path that you walk for yourself and for your family.
If I just can quickly paraphrase, I think what you said is very true for me. It's the comment that I've heard, we think we own our house. I'm sitting here in the house that I own.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is, after 30 years of owning this house, I've come to realize that this house owns me.
Yeah.
And, it really, all the things I have to do on a daily, weekly basis to repair things around here, it's not my choice anymore. It's owning me. So you really got to think through, with your business. Do you own your business or does the business own you? And you got to think, look the patience out.
So Matt, I think you also sold an integration business. What's that little bit you need to give to people?
The little bit what now?
The little bit to share as far as how to change that mindset.
Yeah, I mean, I think the panelists pretty well covered it. For me, it's about anymore these days. It's about knowing and understanding what aligns with my purpose and my future. And the key points that I took away from today that you guys pointed out are when it's time to go. And usually it's that passion, especially in this industry, because without passion, it just, the thing just falls apart. And when that passion becomes questioned, it's probably a good time to just take a couple of weeks off and figure out if it's a temporary thing or longer lasting. I think if I would have done that, there would have been some clarity around that time. But again, I was much less mature, back then than I am now. So yeah, that's all that I have to add. I think this was a great session. A lot of incredible stuff came out of it.
Yeah, I really appreciate you guys joining us, and I think all of you have offered, hey, if anyone out there is listening, needs some help or advice or wants to talk through some stuff, I know Matt and I are always open, and I believe Gordon, Ed, and Eric are also happy to have those conversations with any integrator that wants to.
Absolutely.
Yeah, take advantage of that, guys. Don't be afraid. There's help out there, and I think we all need it.
Will you put our email address? So people,
We'll put all your email, if you don't mind, we'll put all your email addresses right in the show notes, and people can reach out as they see fit. So cool. Well, thanks for a great session, guys. Eric, Ed, Gordon, appreciate you spending this time, and thank you for running that session at CD. I think the two conversations have been great. So
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Matt and Brent. I mean, this wouldn't be possible without your guys' efforts coordinating it. You always need someone leading the herd. And thank you to both of you guys for making the time, having the resources. This has been really cool. It's been really cool.
Yeah,
Appreciate
and not just to your one, but I think you guys provide valuable service to the industry. So,
thank you, Gordon.
Probably part of that.
Thank you. It feels good, Gordon,
Thank
which
you.
is these days what's the most important thing to me. If it feels good, you keep doing it. If it doesn't feel good,
Keep doing it.
change it.
Roll is vital.
That's right. Yeah, thank you.
Exactly.
Right. Will of violence. Please.
Yeah, so thank you all for listening out there, and until next time, this is the Flywheel Effect. And if you enjoyed this episode, please give us a like, a follow, or share it with someone who you think find value in it too. So thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you for tuning in to the Flywheel Effect. Our journey through the intricate world of luxury home services continues to be fueled by your passion for excellence and innovation. If you found value in our conversations today, don't forget to follow us wherever you get your podcasts. More insights and resources. Visit us online at growwithvital.com. Until next time.